Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome on in. We're going to give folks about 30 seconds here just to make their way into the room. But thank you all for joining right on time. We appreciate it. Good to see some familiar names. Welcome, welcome. Okay, we're going to give probably about 15 seconds more or so before we start the session here. All right, excellent. Looks like we've got a good number of folks who plan to join coming in. So we'll go ahead and get started. But thank you everyone for taking the time this afternoon to join. Like I said, good to see some familiar names. For those of you that know me from the previous sessions and interactions, my name's Anthony. I'm the director here. Good to have everybody join us for the continuation of our Explore Emory series. We've got a great lineup of events this week. We've got a great session this afternoon with a few folks here on the public interest work and different areas you can get involved within that area here at Emory. This afternoon, we'll be doing a session with our law library. So if you're interested in the resources available there and taking a virtual tour of the library, join us for that at 4 p.m. We've got two great alumni hangouts virtually this week with Texas and California. So hopefully if you're interested in joining one of those markets after graduation, you can join us for an alumni discussion there. We'll also have our in-person alumni events in DC and New York this week as well. I'm actually in my hotel room in DC right now, so excited to meet you all if you're able to make it tomorrow evening here in DC, and on my way up to New York on Thursday. We'll also have some sessions on financial aid, our Tiger program. We'll have a mock classroom with Professor Lawrence, which is always a great experience. So I encourage you to particularly pay attention to that one if you're available. So we look forward to seeing you at all of these events. For today, like I said, we are going to talk a lot more in depth about all of the opportunities that you'll have here at Emory and in Atlanta and across the nation with all of our opportunities within public service and interest in this area, the student organizations, how you can get involved and all of that. So glad to see so many folks join us and have interest in this area. It's a really, really important field, especially if you're interested in nonprofit or government. We know we always need folks in that area to help us and make sure everything runs the way it's supposed to. So thank you all for joining. Without further ado, I am going to step out, but I wanted to introduce you all to our Assistant Dean for Public Service, Dean Rita Sheffy, who will be with you throughout your 3 years here at Emory to walk you through all of those opportunities. And she's going to go into detail about all of that as well. We're also joined by Georgette Thin, who also works with Dean Sheffy, and will also be there to kind of help and guide you in those conversations and those opportunities throughout your time here at Emory. So without further ado, I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves over to you all and to talk to you a little bit more about the public service opportunities you'll have here at Emory. So I'll hand it off to you all, and we'll of course take questions. So if you do have questions, use that chat or the question and answer function, and we'll be able to get you in front to ask the question. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Dean Sheffy, and we look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, Anthony. And it's so great to have all of you join us. I'm just sorry I can't see you all either in person or online, but hopefully we'll have a lot of questions at the end. And when we do that, you can unmute yourself, turn your video on, and I'll get to meet some of you that way. So as Anthony said, I'm Rita Sheffy. I'm the Assistant Dean for Public Service at Emory Law School, and I've been there just over 7 years. And I love working with the students. And I'm going to share my screen in just a minute and show and talk through a couple of things about the broad scope of what we do in the Center for Public Service. But before I do that, I want to ask Georgette just to introduce herself very briefly, tell you a little bit about her background. She joined us in January of this year and has already really hit the ground running and is a great asset to the office. So Georgette, if you'll just tell folks a little bit about where you came from and what you did, then we'll go from there.
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Georgette Thin, and I'm the program coordinator here in the Center for Public Service. I am someone who many, many years ago, I got my certificate in public interest law from the University of Alabama. And so I was very focused on public interest work. While I was in law school, I worked for several organizations around Georgia, the ACLU, the Georgia Innocence Project, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and I have a lot of connections within the public interest field. And so I'm really excited about being here now for students to help continue to encourage law students to be interested in the public interest field and public interest work, and assisting in any way that I can if you have those interests. Thank you.
Thanks, Georgette. And just, I don't want to go into, just very briefly describe my background before I put up the slides. And that is, as I said, I've been at Emory for 7 years. I went to undergraduate at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, and then I went to graduate school in chemistry at Duke University. And so I have to say, go Blue Devils, who won again and made it to the Final Four this year. So, but those of you who might even be Carolina fans, that's okay too. I love working with all the students regardless. But then I went to law school at Boston College and then moved back south. And so for a number of years, I worked with what was then the Hunton and Williams law firm, doing litigation, sort of ranging from environmental litigation to medical products liability to intellectual property. And then increasingly over time, I also began running our pro bono program, did a lot of pro bono work in the community, have served on a number of the nonprofit boards in the Atlanta area, handle a variety of cases for indigent clients and nonprofit organizations, and then eventually found my way to doing that kind of work full time by coming at Emory. So I really love being able to work with students and see how excited you all are about getting involved in this work. So many of you, like our students, have done a lot of volunteer work and have gotten really involved in this even before law school. Some incredible resumes that you bring to Emory. So with that, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has about background or anything later, but let me just go ahead and share my screen, and I won't be able to see easily the questions in the chat, but Anthony's going to help sort of moderate that. Hopefully I'll go quickly through the slides, and then when we will have time at the end to talk through any questions that you have. So hopefully everybody can see the slide that I have up on the screen. So this is just a picture. This is just an opening slide, as it says on there, photo taken pre-pandemic. But this is an example of our pro bono fair that we hold every year in the fall, where we invite a lot of nonprofit organizations and government agencies to come to Emory and talk to students about opportunities for internships, for volunteering, for externships, for postgraduate employment. It's just a wonderful, wonderful event. Usually sometime in October. For the last couple of years, we've done it virtually, and that's been really fun and fascinating too, because of the platform that we did it on, that made it really easy for the organizations to get involved and also easy for the students as well. So just something that is one of the signatures of our office. But when I first started at Emory 7 years ago, I created, it was a brand new office, a brand new center at that point, and I created a vision and a mission statement for the center. And I've got that vision on the screen, really so that we hope that by graduation, all students from Emory will have participated in some kind of public service activities. And I'll talk in a minute about sort of the scope of that. And then the mission being that we graduate students who value and will incorporate public service into their professional careers. And you can do this as a public interest lawyer, a government lawyer, or in private practice doing pro bono work, or in any number of other ways that you can engage in public service. So as I said, it's important to talk about terminology. And when the center was created, it was called the Center for Public Service. Some people questioned why it wasn't called public interest. But the reason for that is that public service is really a broader phrase that refers to a whole variety of things, from, you might think of, particularly with lawyers who serve on nonprofit boards, who have appointed positions in the government and government agencies, who may engage in volunteering in a variety of different ways in the community. And then, and also engaging in things like judicial clerkships, which is a very important part of the work that our office does. Public interest is really part of public service, and that's specifically focused on individuals who want to work for a legal aid organization, for an organization that focuses on immigrants or women and children, any of a number of special populations. And so public interest is where you might work full-time and really focus your legal career on doing that type of work. And then we also, this also incorporates pro bono work, which for law students can be done volunteering for a legal services organization while you're in law school. And then of course, for lawyers, as I did, if you're working even for a firm, you can do pro bono work for indigent clients as well. So public service being the broader context, I suppose I could also put community service within that, because we do help support and facilitate a lot of community service work that many of the students do during their time with us. So one important aspect of the center's work is career advising, and specifically public service career advising. And I've listed on the screen the many different kinds of areas which sort of go to what I said about how broad this area is. So I meet with students to advise about those who want to go into public interest careers and do it full time, students who want to go into the government, whether it be the federal, state, local, or even international, for that matter, government positions, postgraduate public interest fellowships. There are a large number of those available that either are positions that are posted as jobs themselves that come with funding, or positions that you can work with an organization and help create. Judicial clerkships, as I mentioned earlier, is a very important part. Those are postgraduate 1 or 2 year positions where students work with a judge or several judges and really get an inside look into how the judicial system works. And then the last two areas are sort of more on the financial side. We have a very robust loan repayment assistance program. You can find details about that on the website to help support those recent graduates who are in those kind of public interest or government careers that, as I'm sure you know, do not pay quite as well as being in some of the law firms. And so we have a great loan repayment program that can help support you in that, in being able to do that work. And then, of course, summer grants. We're in the summer grant season right now, where our students who have public interest or government positions during the summer can apply for a $5,000 grant to help cover their living expenses for the summer. And so that's part of what we do as well. Programming is an important part of our center. So these are just some examples of the kinds of programming that we might do during the year on public interest. Information sessions where we bring in people who've worked in some of the areas that you might be interested in to talk about that. Skill building, we help work in conjunction with the Career Center and support the work that the Career Center does in helping you work on things like cover letters, resumes, writing samples, and that sort of thing. And then, of course, workshops and a variety of training sessions. I will take just a quick step back and talk about sort of the relationship with the Career Center. When you come to Emory Law, you are assigned to an individual career advisor in the Career Center. But when you also may decide that you're interested in public interest work or one of the areas that fall within the scope of the Center for Public Service, then in addition to your career advisor, you would come and work with me as well. So in a sense, you're getting two advisors instead of just one. And we will focus much more specifically on the strategy for your job search, also the strategy for your clerkship search. And so, so while you're at Emory, you would have your assigned career advisor and also work with Georgette and me in the Center for Public Service. And then I just listed at the bottom of this slide, the career and job fairs. There are certain fairs, the judicial clerkship job fair and the public sector career fair are Georgia-specific job fairs where many of our students get their summer jobs or in some cases postgraduate jobs. And those fairs are only open to the students in the 5 Georgia law schools, not to students outside of the state. And then we also participate in a larger job fair that is open to students all across the country. Volunteer opportunities, I mentioned pro bono work is a very important part of what we do. The Emory Public Interest Committee is definitely the student organization that I would strongly urge you to join as soon as you arrive on campus and to get to know them. There's some wonderful opportunities there. They really are the flagship sort of premier public interest organization on campus. A lot of other student groups also engage in coordinating volunteer projects, but EPIC is really the one that, that does the vast majority of it. And they have a wonderful mentoring program where they will assign a first-year student to a second or third-year student who is already has some experience in maybe the area that you're interested in. So if you come in and say, I think I want to be a public defender, then they can pair you with a second or third year student who has worked in public defense and can help guide you from their perspective about courses, externships, volunteer opportunities, which offices that they think are great to work with, and so on. So EPIC is wonderful. It's also the organization that that I serve as the advisor for, where we raise money for summer grants and put on a couple of significant events every year. EPIC has a conference and also an Inspiration Awards event that are just great for students to get involved, and also leadership opportunities, which are very important for you as well. And then the last is on this slide is pro bono volunteer opportunities, which I'll talk about just a little bit more. So at Emory, we don't have a pro bono requirement. I don't personally believe in requiring people to do what is the professional and moral thing to do, but we do recognize outstanding pro bono work by our students. Here's what we consider. This is consistent with what the American Bar Association considers to be pro bono legal work. It's unpaid, it's law related, supervised by an attorney, and assisting in providing legal services without charge for people of limited means, for nonprofit, nonpartisan organizations, and for others who are seeking to promote or secure access to justice. For law students, it also would be, not only is it unpaid, but it's also not for academic credit. So if you're doing an externship for which you get academic credit, the hours that are required for that would not count for pro bono work, for pro bono credit, but any hours that you would work above and beyond the requirement would count for pro bono. And so there are lots of programs that we help support. Lots of individuals reach out to us and want law student volunteers, so we will help schedule the training session for them and help connect you with some organizations. You can do that on your own, of course, as well, but it's a great way for you to get some really practical experience to augment the coursework that you're doing during law school. As I said, we recognize students who do pro bono work. We don't, as we don't require it. If you do 25 hours in an academic year, you'll receive a certificate. And if you do 75 hours for JD students over your 3 years at Emory Law, then you will receive a medal to wear at commencement, which is something that's definitely sought after by our students. And we see as we're getting into the third year, many of our third year students are anxious to get over that 75-hour mark so that they can wear the medal at graduation, and the dean recognizes those students by having them all stand and talking about the importance of that work. And so when you come to Emory, we provide a lot more information about how to do this, but it's really a great way for you to demonstrate both to yourself and also to others that you've made this commitment to service. Many opportunities. I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are just some of the opportunities that we have available. I will touch on briefly the couple of the volunteer clinics that are on the right side of the screen, a couple of the very popular organizations we have. Most law schools have academic credit clinics, which we do as well, but most don't have a volunteer clinic. So that's something that is unique to Emory that I think provides a lot of opportunities for students. The academic clinics you have no doubt heard of or can read about on the website. Those include the Turner Environmental Law Clinic, the Barton Child Law and Policy. There are 3 clinics under the Barton Center, and the International Humanitarian Law Clinic. So those are all great things that you can do during the school year and get academic credit for. But the Emory Volunteer Clinic for Veterans is a purely volunteer clinic. We currently have 2 staff attorneys that work in that clinic and support students. We also work with volunteer attorneys. And the work that the clinic does is estate planning, so doing wills and advance directives for veterans who have served our country. We also help them apply for benefits because they're entitled to a lot of significant benefits as a result of their service, but sometimes that's a little challenging to be able to get to those. And then for those who may have been discharged from the service with less than honorable discharge because they had post-traumatic stress syndrome or something that wasn't recognized at the time that they were discharged, we help them apply for that. All of those things can be a huge benefit to them and their families from a financial standpoint. And it's a wonderful opportunity to work directly with clients, to work on, in some cases, significant briefs and pleadings that are filed. And so I strongly urge that for anybody who's interested. And then the Immigrant Legal Assistance Clinic is our immigration clinic that meets monthly, currently on Zoom, but monthly with individuals seeking advice about their immigration status. It is a referral clinic primarily, so that we meet with individuals and do intake, which is a great skill for all of you to learn, and then talk to an immigration attorney who is online with us, who provides brief advice to the individuals, and then we can refer them to some of our partner organizations if they need additional help. And so that's also been a wonderful opportunity for students to volunteer. And then our International Refugee Assistance Project, which has been working with refugees to help them apply for status in the United States. We currently have a project where we are helping, we're working with an alumnus who is helping a number of individuals who escaped from Afghanistan, who were interpreters there during the war and have now gotten out of Afghanistan, and he's helping them, and our students are working with him to help those folks apply for protected status as well. So just a couple of the clinics I wanted to highlight. And then of course you can see on the left some other projects that we have that we support and work with. And there are many more than I have on the screen, but I'm happy to talk to you about those opportunities. And so now I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, maybe a lot, and talk about judicial clerkships. You may have heard that judicial clerkships, working with a judge for a year or two after law school, how beneficial that can be for your career, and also just what a wonderful opportunity to get kind of a peek behind the curtain and see how judges make decisions in cases. It's great preparation if you want to go into litigation, but it also is tremendous preparation for transactional practice, for bankruptcy practice. And we have compiled information concerning business courts around the country that if you're interested in transactional work, that might be a great place for you to go spend a year working with a judge, looking at purely at commercial litigation cases. And so there's lots of different things. Again, similar to the public interest world, we do a lot of programming, judges, current and former clerks. Also, one of my favorite programs every year is to ask students, 3Ls who already have clerkships lined up, participate on a panel talking to you about why they decided to do that, how they went through the process, and to really get their advice, their sort of very timely advice about what they did and how they did it. And those are just great opportunities. It's such a unique opportunity, and I think it's fair to say that I've not ever heard anybody who did a clerkship say that they regretted it or they wish they had, they wish they hadn't done it, or it's just most lawyers say it's the best legal job that they've ever had. And part of the benefit is connecting with a judge in a way that really is an incredible mentoring relationship, and many lawyers maintain relationships with their judges over the years and consult them before they make any job changes, and really use them as an incredible professional and personal mentor. And so I strongly urge you to consider that. Some people may think that, oh, if I don't have the top grades, that's out of reach for me, but that's really not true. As I like to say, there's a clerkship for everyone, although not every clerkship is for everyone. And so we work really closely with you to help create a strategy for what works for your particular circumstances. And then part of Georgette's job is to help with the administrative assistance with applications. So we want to make it as easy for you as possible to be able to submit your applications and get them in good order and so forth. So that's a very important function of the office as well. So I think that I'm at the point of sort of raced through some slides and have covered a lot of different ground. I have a couple of more things that I'll say, but just so you can see, here's the contact information for the two of us. You feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions, as you're making. If those of you who haven't yet decided to join us in the fall, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to email me, call. You're welcome to text me as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen here in a second and take the questions that we may have that are in the chat or that you have in the Q&A. I will say one other thing that I didn't mention that I wanted to mention is about externships. Externships don't technically fall within my office, but they're very, very overlapping with internships that we do help support. And just from a standpoint of terminology, when we speak of internships, we speak of part-time volunteer opportunities that you might work a couple of hours a week for a nonprofit organization, for example. It's unpaid, it would be pro bono work. Externships and internships also are what you might do during the summer. So it might be a full-time nonprofit or government job during the summer. But externships have a very special place and name at Emory, and those are what you might do for a semester during school, working either for one of our clinics as a clinical student or working for a nonprofit or organization or government agency, putting in a required number of hours and spending a lot more time in that and getting academic credit for it. And so being in the place that we are in Atlanta, we have tremendous access to all kinds of organizations that have students as externs during the year. We've just gone through that process with students being selected, some of them to work for judges for a semester, some of them for nonprofits, government agencies, and so forth. And so those are awesome opportunities as well. And so, I just think that's, as I said to Anthony earlier, I think we've had so many students that come from elsewhere around the country and then get to Atlanta and decide, oh, this is such a great place, I want to stay here. But during the time that you're in law school, you have so many wonderful opportunities to get involved in the community, and that really helps you augment the academic part of your education. So with that, I'm going to stop, and I know we have some questions, Anthony. So let's go with this.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll get to the student questions in a minute. I did want to touch on two things a little bit further because I think they're a bit unique to Emory as well. One of those is the volunteer clinics that you were mentioning about. I think, like you said, they're a little unique in our offerings, but I think it's also an advantage for students and the ways they can get involved earlier on than some of the academic clinics as well. So could you talk a little bit, if a student coming into Emory already knew they wanted to be involved in, IRAP or the volunteer clinic for veterans, how they would go about and how early they could start that process?
Absolutely. So I'll start with the academic clinics. So those would not be open to a first-year student. Those would only be open to second and third-year students. So if you're interested in the Barton or International Humanitarian or Turner clinics, then those you would apply for either your second or your third year. Externships similarly are not something that you can do until your second or third year. And so I will say, when you come to Emory, almost every student I've ever met comes to Emory and wants to immediately get involved in doing something in a sense of volunteering. We do try to caution you to not overload yourselves in the first semester because law school is different and than any other type of education. And we hope that you'll spend some time sort of getting acclimated to how classes work and how you need to outline and study and all of that. But with that said, there are some opportunities that you can get involved and volunteer from the very first semester if you want to. And as Anthony mentioned, a couple of those are the volunteer clinics I mentioned. So the Veterans Clinic, the Immigration Clinic, IRAP, those are things that you can do from the time you get on campus. We have training sessions that are usually done at the beginning of the semester, and we also have some of those that are recorded, but you can get involved in those as first-year students, and we have many first-year students who are involved in those activities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's like Dean Sheffy said, you want to make sure you've got a handle on your coursework and you're studying and outlining and reading and making sure you're feeling good about that. But it's a great opportunity to start, like Dean Sheffy said, just build those foundational skills, right? How do you intake clients? How do you have a phone call? How do you make notes? How do you pass that on to the volunteer attorneys or to our staff attorneys and work with the clients in that way. So it's a great way to start building those skills really early on, which you will certainly use during that first summer as you look at internships and externships and those opportunities as well. The other piece I wanted to go into a little bit more too that is unique is the EPIC organization and particularly the EPIC grants, because I think that's so helpful for students. As you mentioned, it's not something you're going to necessarily make money off of, but I think it's a great opportunity for students to be able to participate in different public service and pro bono opportunities, and not have to take on additional debt in many ways. And so could you just talk a little bit more about the process and how a student would go about trying to get one of those grants for the summer?
Sure. So the way our EPIC grant process typically works is that you, looking toward the summer, these apply to summer employment. You would, in the early part of your second semester, your spring semester. So if you were a first year now, you would have already done this. You would go out and find an internship for the coming summer, either in a public interest organization, like I said, sort of Atlanta Legal Aid, Georgia Legal Services, Taharay for immigration work, Catholic Charities, any number of other, Southern Center for Human Rights, lots of organizations. Could be in Atlanta, could be anywhere and around the country. And so you would line up and also for government agencies and now for judges. So we now count for, you can now, if you have a judicial internship for the summer, you can apply for an EPIC grant. So you would line up your internship for the summer, and then by a specified deadline, you would fill out an application and submit that. That application consists of a few little essays. They're not very long. You also, for EPIC, are required to have done a specified number of volunteer hours during the year. So you would have to volunteer at any number of types of things. Some of it can be volunteering on campus. It can be the clinical things that we just talked about, the Veterans Clinic, immigration, and so forth. But you would do a specified number of volunteer hours. And then there are a couple of EPIC events, the EPIC conference that's every fall and the Inspiration Awards that are every February. And so you check all of those boxes, you submit your application, and then it becomes a question of, then we have a number of people who, well, I'm going to back up. So if in the old world, before the pandemic, we did in-person interviews as well. Now we're doing interviews online. So that's a lot easier for the reviewers and also for the students. So you would do a pre-recorded interview, answering several questions that we give you. And then we have a group of people who will review the application and the interview, score those. And so I end up with a list of all the student applicants and scores from the highest score to the lowest. Then we just simply look at how much money do we have this year, and we start giving out grants from the top of the list. Last year, we were extremely fortunate and we were able to fund every student who needed a grant for the summer, but it's not in any way guaranteed. The summer before that, we weren't able to fund everybody. So it's, it's a matter of fitting the demand to the resources that we have. There are a couple of other grants that are sort of related to that. The Justice John Paul Stevens Foundation provides grants to a number of law schools around the country. This year, they increased their commitment to Emory in such a way that with their commitment and Emory's match, we're giving out a total of 6 grants that are at $6,000 each compared to the $5,000 EPIC grants that we normally give out. We also help support students in applying for other grant opportunities as well. So it's a great way to try to get some funding for the summer to help pay the rent and pay other expenses, which is often more difficult during the summer. And particularly if you have an apartment in Atlanta, but you're taking an internship in New York and you've got to try to deal with rent, that can be challenging. But as I said, it is a competitive process. We've been very fortunate some years. We just continue to work with people in the community to make donations to that to help support students.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. So we'll move on to our student questions now. We've got a few here in the queue. Please feel free to keep sending those questions in as we get to these next few questions from students. We'll be able to get you up in front of Dean Sheffy and Georgette and ask your questions here so you can get all the information that you need. So we're going to start with Fisher. Fisher, I know you said you had 2 questions, so feel free to shoot them one at a time, and we're happy to answer the questions, but good to see you.
Great. Yeah, glad to see you guys again. This question is for Ms. Thin, but just want to thank Dean Sheffy for that presentation. It was really useful. So Ms. Thin, Georgia has the 4th highest incarceration rate among states around the world. So US states and then countries. Does Emory itself, or does Emory work with any nonprofits that work with our formerly incarcerated individuals and neighbors to help them re-enter society?
Well, Emory doesn't, there are some organizations in the state of Georgia that do address reentry issues. I can tell you that the Southern Center for Poverty does address some incarceration issues with conditions inside of prisons and things like that. And there is a Georgia reentry organization that addresses reentry. And it's not that we have a specific working relationship with them. However, if a student were to come in and tell me that's something that they're interested in, I certainly can make some phone calls and refer them to that. We work with the Georgia Innocence Project very closely. And of course, that is, addressing issues. Sometimes those persons are currently incarcerated or formerly incarcerated, and they're working around issues to determine whether or not they were innocent when in fact they were found guilty. And I can tell you that the Georgia Innocence Project does work with a lot of organizations for the persons that they have exonerated to assist them with reentry. And even within the organization itself, they have a program where exonerees assist each other with reentry issues. So while I can't think of a specific program that we work with directly, we do have several programs that we're aware of and that we have referred students to, that I know students have worked with in the past. And we do have organizations that we do have very close working relationships with that certainly do address that issue.
Yeah, and Fisher, let me just add to that for the Georgia Reentry Project, one of our student organizations, and I believe it's the Civil Rights Practice Society, does have a project with that entity. And has had a number of students that have volunteered with, and I've talked with the attorney who started that project, and we have some students who have worked with that off and on for the last several years, so that there's definitely some activity there. The other one I would mention is the Georgia Justice Project, which we also have students who volunteer with and do internships and externships with, which works with people and getting them settled into the community as well. So as Georgette mentioned, I mean, we don't have a specific Atlanta Emory law project, but we have students working with those organizations that are all in Atlanta, and have wonderful opportunities to do that kind of work. And we have often student organizations who create projects with some of the specific projects with these organizations that is usually driven by one, really eager student who really is focused on a particular subject area. And we try to work with them and also with the organization to make sure that the project is set up in such a way that makes sense for the students, but also for the organization.
Thank you both for that. And my second question is probably for Director Anthony. The LRAP program has a $120,000 cap each year for recipients. How much of that was used last year? And if all of it was used, were all the participants paid equally in terms of, I guess, a reduction in how much they were repaid?
Yeah, I'm going to hand this one off to Dean Sheffy, since she works very closely with students on managing that LRAP process.
Yeah, so we have never hit the cap, either in the 7 years I've been there or in the years before that. So from the beginning of the LRAP program, we've never hit that cap. The program, there's a lot of detail about that. The current program is detailed on the website, so you can just look at Emory Law LRAP and find all the current information. What we do every year is in December, we review the program, make any necessary changes to it, so that then the people who apply starting in January, that would be the plan that would apply to them. But the one that's currently in effect for people who have graduated and are applying for this year is on the website. So there's $120,000 cap. I think it specifies that if we ever hit or exceeded that cap, then we would prorate the amount that's that we have available across the people who have applied for it. But as I said, I don't remember the specific dollar amount last year, but it was considerably lower than the cap, because last year and the year before, during COVID, the federal government paused payments on student loans. So many of our graduates were paying nothing for pretty much all of 2021 and even through into May of this year. We're really paying nothing on their federal loans. So there was nothing for us to reimburse. And so last year we were, as I said, I don't remember the exact amount, but it was something even, less than half of that. It was definitely well below the 120. And even in the years before that, we were pretty far below the cap. So if we did hit the cap, then we would prorate it. So we would have determined what you would get and look at everybody else. And then we would take that, your part as a percentage of whatever amount of money we had, take that as a percentage of 120 and allocate it that across the board. But that has not come even close to being an issue.
Thank you all for your thoughtful answers.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
yeah, thanks, Fisher. Good to-
Yeah, Fisher, where are you in school? Where are you in college?
I'm well out of undergrad.
Okay.
I went to University of South Carolina.
Okay, cool. Well, it's nice to meet you at least somewhat online. I hope I'll see you in person.
Likewise. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Fisher. Excellent. So while we're on the topic of LRAP, we actually had two very similar questions come in. So I'm going to let Emma come up and ask her question. Jackson Downs actually had a very similar question. So I'm sorry, Jackson, we won't be able to get you up here, but Emma had a great question just about more of the specifics around LRAP and how it works and how students go about that process. So Emma, we'll bring you up if you want to ask your question, but thanks for joining, and the floor is all yours.
Great. Thank you all so much for hosting this session today. I was just hoping you could speak a little bit more about the specifics of the LRAP program and talk about which types of employment qualify and for how long you can participate in the program. And then I actually also have a second question now that I have the floor, if you don't mind answering as well. I was hoping you could speak a little bit on the career advising front, if most of the students who are pursuing public interest end up staying and working in the Atlanta area, or if you do have a lot of students who end up in DC in particular post-graduation.
Sure. Well, let me take the second question first, since you just asked it. It's also fresher on my mind. So we have students that go all over the country, and specifically for public interest, we have a number of students who want to stay and work in Atlanta, whether it's in public defenders' offices or for civil nonprofit organizations or for government agencies. But we also have a really large number of students. Probably almost, in thinking about my LRAP participation specifically, I probably have at least an equal number of people who are outside of Atlanta. So DC, New York, New England, Texas, sort of Florida, you name it. We have students who go all over. So Emory is a national and even international school in many respects. And some students want to go back to where they grew up or where they went to college. Other students just have a place that they, really, it's where they want to start their career, where they have a spouse or significant other. There's many, many reasons why people go to different places. We do, as I said earlier, have a lot of students who want to stay in Atlanta. They get to Atlanta and they fall in love with it. And of course, most of us, there certainly are natives in Atlanta, but many people like me came from somewhere else and really, have fallen in love with the city and all it has to offer and decide to stay here. So I would say, probably more people are leaving Atlanta and going other places, but we certainly have a lot that stay as well. So I don't have the exact numbers for you. That's something that the career presentation can provide a little more detail on. But in terms of the students I work with, they really go sort of all over the country. In terms of LRAP, so sort of speaking a little more about how it works, and again, a lot of the details is on the current plan. Well, all of the detail really is on the current plan on the website. And so I'm going to sort of answer your question and also another one that I think is sort of related to it. And so if I don't answer your question specifically, then speak back up and let me know. But so it funds the work that it funds is pretty much anything that you're doing for a 501c3 organization, a typical nonprofit organization, for a government agency, or for a state court in a state court clerkship. So that covers a pretty broad array of careers and opportunities. So that includes public defense, civil defense, other government work, all kinds of nonprofit organizations, as I said, state court judicial clerkships, but not federal ones. And so it's a pretty broad range. I think you'll find that this is very consistent with how other schools fund any kind of loan repayment program. It's pretty much because we are guided by, there are certain regulatory requirements in terms of what we can support. So it typically is, for example, I'll give you an example of something it wouldn't cover. While it would cover 501c3 legal services work for the Sierra Club, it would not cover if you were purely working for the 501c4 part of Sierra Club, which was doing more lobbying work and work like that. So there's very few organizations that it wouldn't cover, but as long as it's a 501c3 charitable nonprofit, it would cover that. With the money that we have available to pay that is not unlike the summer grants. So for the summer grants, we raise money. The source for summer grants is money we raise every year plus interest on several endowments that we have. So there are some significant endowments that help fund summer grants, but there also is considerable individual fundraising that I do every year. On the LREP side, we have two significant endowments that fund 100% of the loan repayment program. So we don't separately currently raise money every year for LREP. There are some alumni who like to contribute to that program and do so, but there's not at the moment an active effort to try to raise money to support that. The current income cap for the work in that program is $65,000. That's up over what it was a few years ago. It was $50,000. As I said, we review it every year and we make any necessary changes. This year, the enhancement that we made to it was to add a cost of living adjustment so that if you are going to New York or DC or Hawaii or some other place that is more expensive than Atlanta, then there's a formula for how that 65 would actually be higher for you if you're in one of those areas. And there's also an enhancement for allowing you to have a raise every year. So you're not stuck with 65,000 for every year, because we assume that, most of you, and depending on the economy, that you're going to get, some type of salary increase each year. You are entitled to apply. The program is available to you up to 10 years. So you can participate in up to 10 consecutive years of participation. There's a provision for taking 1 year off for certain circumstances. And so we hope that by having the income enhancements, that will help more people beyond the first several years be able to participate in the program. And then that program works sort of hand in hand with the public service loan forgiveness program, that when you participate in ours, if you are in getting into the weeds a little bit here, but for those who might have this question, if in order to get essentially 100% of your loan payments made in a year, you need to be enrolled in one of the pay-as-you-earn programs. So something that where the loan payments are based on based on your salary. So if your loans are in one of those programs, then you can essentially get, and let's say you're a single individual, because getting into married couples is a little more complicated. But if you're a single individual and you're in one of those programs, you're essentially going to get 100% of your loans paid in that year. The way it technically works is you apply for it between January and the end of March. So our grads are now applying for it by the deadline, the end of this week. We review your application, we make a decision on the application, and then we would give you an award for this calendar year. So if you're applying now, you would get an award for 2022. You would sign a promissory note basically saying that if you're going to stay in that eligible employment for the next 12 months, and then if at the end of 12 months you're still in that eligible employment, then we forgive that note and that money is yours. So that money is not income to you typically under the IRS. That's it's a loan, but then we forgive the loan at the end of the year. Then next year you would apply again, and we go through that process until you've been there up to 10 years or until you've exceeded the income cap. Like I said, we revisit the cap every year. We've never had an issue with the overall cap for the program, but we would revisit that if all of a sudden we found ourselves with 3 times the number of graduates applying and we were hitting that, then we would revisit that based on the amount of money available. So with that, I hope that answered the LRAP questions. If not, please speak up and let me know.
Yes, that definitely did. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Emma.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. And we'll get now to our final 2 questions. Jackson actually had looks like one more clarification point on the LRAP. So Jackson, you should be able to unmute yourself if you want to ask that kind of clarifying question and go a bit more into that. Let's see, Jackson, are you there? Let's see if we can get him up. If not, I can ask his question for.
Yeah, I can see the question in the chat in the Q&A if you want me to go ahead and address it.
Yeah, why don't we go with that? That should be fine, and then we'll get to Olivia for our final question.
Okay, awesome. So Jackson, it looks like your question for everybody's benefit sort of relates to the fact that many people have heard that public service loan forgiveness, the federal program, is kind of stressful, as you say, and tricky to execute all the way to forgiveness. And that there has been a lot of press and news about that. So his question was, could we speak on that and whether you can feel safe relying on public service loan forgiveness and LRAP financially? What I'll start with is say there's no guarantees in life about this, but I can say as far as LRAP is concerned, the endowments are pretty secure. They have been generating quite a bit of interest, particularly over the last couple of years, and we've not come close to the cap. So LRAP for now is pretty safe and secure. If we all of a sudden had, 5 times the number of people applying, and I could imagine that could happen, but it hasn't ever happened. So I don't see that that's an issue. I would like to see us, work to add more money to the endowment so that we can help, continue protecting it for the future, but that we've not even come close to that being an issue. As far as public service loan forgiveness, that is obviously outside of our control. I will say that the government affairs people at Emory, there's always an office like that at every university. They're well aware, and I've had conversations with them about this. So every time Congress or the president sort of threatens public service loan forgiveness, to threaten to take it away or to eliminate it or to reduce it in some way, they, like many other schools around the country, are aware of that and are champions for keeping it in place. The one thing that I will say, I don't know if this is cynical or what, but the one thing I will say about the public service loan forgiveness is that I do believe that it applies to some people who actually work for some of the elected officials in Washington. And so it would be difficult for me to imagine that if push came to shove, that our elected officials in Washington would do away with a program that benefits people who work for them. So, I mean, that's sort of the one side of it. I also think that it would be unlikely to think that that would be something that if it ever were eliminated, that it would, it would be anything other than prospective and not retrospective. But I think the trickiness that has been the issue with having people, and we haven't had any issues with any of our students not get approved for that, but I think the trickiness is just maintaining the record keeping. 10 years is a long time, and you have to have 120 on time payments, and you have to have some documentation of that. And so if you're a very organized and disciplined person, and from the beginning you start to track that and maintain a record of that, and having the knowing who the supervisors of all your work and that sort of thing, if you maintain all of that, then you should be pretty straightforward to get that approved. So that's about the closest to any kind of assurance that I can give you about how both of these are available. I have a little greater control, obviously, over LRAP than the no control over public service loan forgiveness, but I think it's highly unlikely that will go away completely.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for all the detail. I know LRAP is a complicated process, but I think it's a valuable tool for a lot of students going into this field. So excellent. So we're gonna bring up Olivia. Olivia has a great question, I think, to end on here. So we'll make this our last question before we wrap up. But Olivia, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are y'all?
Good. Excellent.
Just want to echo everyone's words and say thank y'all so much for putting on this event. As someone who's really interested in a public interest career, it's wonderful to hear a seminar dedicated specifically to that topic. But my question is kind of for students who are first on campus. I know that you mentioned EPIC is a great organization for students to get involved with kind of as soon as they step foot on campus. But what are some other organizations, opportunities, or programs either on campus or in the community that one else can get involved with within their first year at Emory?
Sure. So yeah, and thanks for your question. I'm not going to even begin to list them all because I'm not as directly involved with some of them, but I'll say that so besides EPIC, there's students who have the street law organization that is also available, starting with first year students, to be able to go out and primarily do sort of informational and educational presentations to students in the secondary schools about what their rights are and about and so that's a terrific program. I know a lot of students participate in. I know that and IRAP is also one that I mentioned earlier that essentially functions as a volunteer clinic, although it's not technically a volunteer clinic, but it provides volunteer opportunities for students to get involved in the first year. Another one is civil rights always has some volunteer opportunities. I believe they're the ones that were involved with the reentry project, but they also have been very active in the last several years in volunteer opportunities. So any of the student organizations that have a project or create a project, those are pretty much open to first-year students. There's really no limitation on that. Really, the only limitations that you have, I would say there are sort of two main limitations. One is that the academic clinics and the externships you can't do before your second year because your classes are really prescribed in the first semester and they're prescribed except for one elective in the second semester. So for academic purposes, for academic credit, that's one limitation. The other is really the practical one that both Anthony and I touched on earlier, and that is, law school is very different from anything any of us ever dealt with before. And so we really strongly recommend that you not overcommit yourself in any way in the first semester. Although I certainly have students who come in and they say, I want to do immigration work. And so, we're not going to turn them down, and they absolutely can participate in the immigration clinic. So there's others. I think the criminal law is also one that has had some projects. I will say, and I'm trying to think without the list of organizations in front of me, but any student organization that has like a community service project you can do. On the pure sort of legal side, then the ones that come to mind are the volunteer clinics and the work that civil rights has done. Also, of course, street law. But there's just lots of opportunities. There's sort of, in fact, I will say the biggest challenge for most of our students is there are many more opportunities than you can possibly participate in your 3 years at Emory. So being able to have some, make some discernment about what makes sense for you and being very careful not to get overcommitted, particularly early on. There's besides, I'll say two other things, and then I know Anthony wants to wrap up, but the pro bono fair I mentioned that we do in October is a great way to get exposed to external organizations that have opportunities that you can volunteer for. Some of them will take 1L, some of them won't, partly because some of them might need you to be in court and you can't be certified to do that until your second or third year. And so that's one way. The other is that we always have a student activities fair during the fall when you first start, where all of the student organizations and a lot of the sort of law school staff related organizations have tables set up so that there's, they talk about here's what we do, here's how you can get involved. You can be a member of many student organizations. The question becomes how much effort you want to put into it, and you don't want to spread yourselves too thin. And I would say try something. If it turns out not to be for you, try something else. On all of those volunteer activities, once you start something, you're not committed to following through for 3 years. You can, try it and say that was fun and that was useful, but I want to go do something else. So many opportunities like that. And I think a reason I mentioned EPIC is because they really are the primary area where public interest students do come together. But as I said, many of them are also very active in the Student Bar Association, in the Legal Association of Women Students, in various affinity groups. So, all of our affinity groups, and I failed to mention earlier, though it was on the slide, our outlaw organization has been very active in doing legal volunteer work for Atlanta Legal Aid, Family Equality, and others in helping LGBTQ plus individuals. And so that's another, if you're interested in that work, then there's a number of projects that we help support in that area as well. So and virtually all of those are available to first year students.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks, Olivia. So excellent. I know we're just about up on time. So I just want to say thank you again so much to Dean Sheffy and Georgette for joining us and providing such great insight into all of the different opportunities you'll have here in Atlanta, at Emory specifically, and really across the country as you look to take your summer experiences and post-graduation career as well. So thank you so much for taking the time and going through all those details and all of those opportunities. I know our students appreciate it very much. For all of you that joined us today, thank you again for taking an hour out of your class schedule or out of your work schedule to join us and learn a little bit more about Emory. If you missed any of our previous sessions, we do have recordings available now on our Explore Emory website, so you can always check out some of our previous sessions on there. This recording will be posted in the next few days as well. So be sure to check those out. Hopefully we'll see you at a few more events this week, or see you in person, either at our alumni events or at our visiting student day next week. But thank you all so much. It's always great to see everybody. We hope you have a great rest of your days. Hopefully we'll see some of you at 4 p.m. And thank you all again. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, and I'll just add, thank you all for joining us. I hope if you have any questions, feel free to email me, and I hope I'll see many of you next Friday on campus.
Great. Excellent. Have a great day, everybody, and welcome to Emory.
Take care. Bye, everybody.